there is an argument if they divide 6 and 6, meaning the mishmar that arrives and the mishmar that leaves, each one gets 6 challahs, because on Shabbos was the day when they would switch mishmaros during the Shabbos, which we actually saw that the mishmar that was leaving, they did the morning sacrifice and the musaf sacrifice. The mishmar that was arriving did the Tamid Shalbain Hoarbayim. They did the afternoon sacrifice. They also did the Bazichin. They would do the frankincense. So the mishmars were dividing on Shabbos. How did they divide it on a regular Shabbos? Again, the reason why the Mishnah is talking about this, about the division of the Lechem HaPanim, is really because we went off on a tangent. And the main point the Mishnah started with was about the holidays and how do you divide the portions for the holidays. It turns out that the showbread was a major part of this. So once we're talking about the showbreads, now we contrast the showbreads of the week, the regular Shabbos, to the showbreads of a holiday Shabbos, and a holiday that's next to Shabbos, and so on. So here we have this argument. Rabbi Yehuda says when you're on a regular Shabbos, you divide it 7 and 5. The rabbis, the first opinion of the Mishnah was 6 and 6, sheish and sheish. Rabbi Yehuda said 7 and 5, and so the Mishnah, so the Gemara says, "V'hani taiti ma'ivadetayu." So why do you get 2 extras? According to Rabbi Yehuda, why do you get 2 extras? We're on page 56b on the top. V'hani taiti ma'ivadetayu. What were these 2 extras for? According to Rabbi Yehuda, why did he deserve? Why does the mishmar that is arriving receive 2 extras? It's in the merit of the closing of the doors. Because they would close the doors, the mishmar that entered, they would close the doors that the morning mishmar opened. Therefore, they deserve to get 2 extra. They deserve to get 2 extra challahs, because the understanding seems to be that this is part of the avodah of the earlier mishmar, and you're finishing it. Therefore, you're getting a little portion, a little extra than they, because they really should have finished their avodah. Of course, it doesn't mean it's a punishment, but it's like just the fact is that, they're doing less. You're going to be getting an extra 2. And then next week, you're going to get 2 less because the next group is going to get the extra 2. So it evens itself out. You're getting 7 now, but you're going to get 5 later. According to the rabbis, you get 6 and 6. It's automatically, you're getting your 12. According to the Rabbi Yehuda, you will get your 12, but you're getting 7 now and 5 later. Why? Because you're finishing off the avodah that the other mishmar started. We give like a special bonus to you, that you get 2 extra lechem hapanim. You get a little extra of that bread. And the Gemara says that v'nemalei dal badal. The Gemara asks, of course, the obvious question. Well, I'm anyway going to get 12, and so. Am I really gaining much? Like, why doesn't the mishmar that's leaving tell the mishmar that's arriving, say, why don't you remove your request for 7, remove this rule that you're getting 7 now, so that it'll be removed next week, and you'll get 6 next week. In other words, remove the rule now that you get 7, instead take 6, and then bidal, that will also remove it next week, and you'll have the 12, and you don't have to make this spiel with 7 and 5. You got 6, it'd be a set thing. So the Gemara says, name dal badal. The Gemara answers, Amar Abai baitzina tava mikara, that a baitzina, a small type of melon, is better to get it now than a kara, than a big melon. That a person would rather getting something now than that's like a saying. It's that person would rather, baitzina is tava mikara. Baitzina is better than a kara, and a kara is like a big melon. A baitzina is a small one. Better take the small one now, even though the guy's offering to you. He says, listen, you want to take it now, you can take it now, or you can leave it in the ground and come back to me in a month. And you can take it then. What do? Take it now. Why? The guy might back out, might retract his offer. Right? So better to take something now than to leave it, even though it's smaller, than to leave it for later. And you might not need it later, but maybe you need it now. That would be another reason. And so the same thing would be with the mashmaris, that you deserve to get 7 now. You have a special reason to get 7 now. You could push it off, but the thing is that better to take now rather than later. Better do it. You know, if you offered something now, grab it now, even if it's less. It's almost like a kal v'chomer, because here, you know, you're actually getting the same amount. There, you know, you're ultimately getting the same amount in our example. In the case of the saying that a boitzina is better than a kara, that saying is where you're actually going to get less, and you still take it now, even though you're going to get less. And if you would wait longer, you would get more. Take it now. Take the small one now. It's almost like a kal v'chomer. But our case, the problem is that our case is not exactly the same, because Hashem is not retracting. So if Hashem is not retracting, He's going to give you your lechem apanim no matter what. So why is it? Why does this apply? Why does the saying apply? The saying applies to a person. A person might retract. It's better grab now. If someone's offering you $1,000 now, or in a month from now he'll give you $10,000. You might want to take the $1,000 now instead of 10,000 later. You don't know. Something might happen. Back out. He's handing it to you. Grab it. You know, that I could understand. Well, Hashem is giving you the lechem apanim. You're one of the mishmaros. This has been established for generations. Maybe what do you lose by making this do 6 and 6 instead of 7 and 5? So the thing is that you could still come up with an understanding that maybe I won't be there next week. Maybe I'll be missing. Something will happen. I don't know. Whatever. I'll miss out. So here it's available now. Grab it now. Grab it now. You take now. For sure, it's 7 being given out now. For sure, I should take 7 now. In other words, if you have that opportunity, that option of getting 7 now, grab 7 now. Take now. The idea is still here, even though the specific reasoning that could apply, that maybe the guy will retract, that doesn't apply. But the thing is, maybe I won't need it later, meaning maybe I won't be available later. Maybe there'll be much more kayanim later. There could be other problems. Better grab now what you can, especially that it's 7. Grab it now. So that's what the Gemara answers. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Masaf and Cholkin. Now Rabbi Yehuda comes up with this interesting line. He says, by the way, by the Musaf, you also divide the hides. That the Musaf is also divided. Now the Mishnah didn't mention the Musaf. Our Mishnah doesn't mention that the Musaf hides are divided by the Mishmar. So the Mishnah mentions the lechem apanim gets divided by the 2 groups. And we had a machlokes if it's 6 and 6 or 7 and 5. Fine. What about the hides of Musaf? So comes along Rabbi Yehuda now, and he says, by the way, the Musaf, you actually divide that also between the 2 groups. The group that's arriving, the group that's leaving. Both groups are going to get the Musaf. Now, why didn't the Mishnah say this? Why doesn't the Mishnah mention it? Mishnah talks about the lechem apanim. He has the whole machlokes. Well, what about the hides? Say the hides also. Why does the Mishnah mention it? So the thing is, the Mishnah doesment mention it because the Mishnah is not trying to teach us laws about what gets divided between the different the mishmar that's coming and the mishmar. That's not what our Mishnah is interested in teaching us. We were talking about the holiday. We were talking about the laws of the Yom Tov, and it came up that we're talking about the laws of the Yom Tov and the division is something to do with Yom Tov. Now we're talking about Musaf of Shabbos, not really applicable to our Mishnah. Our Mishnah happened to mention, because it had to talk about Yom Tov and the divisions of the Yom Tov, all the holiday, all the Kayanim Adir and the Beis Hamikdash, and therefore we mention about the Lechem Apanim, but that's not connected to the fact that on Shabbos you might get a portion, that there might be a portion given to the Mishmar that's arriving, which is a little surprising. I would think that only the Mishmar that's leaving gets the Musaf, where the Musaf is the extra sacrifice. That extra sacrifice goes, logically, it should go to the Mishmar that's leaving. Why? Because this is their last day of doing the service, Shabbos. And what happens on Shabbos? You bring the regular communal daily sacrifice, and you also bring what's called a Musaf sacrifice, the extra sacrifice. Shnei kvasim, two kvasim. So you bring that extra sacrifice of the 2 sheep, the two lambs, and therefore you would think it's only the Mishmar that is leaving. They're doing the service, they do that service, and they should be able to divide the hides. Comes along Rav Yehuda over here, and Rav Yehuda says that no, Musafin you also divide. Now the Mishnah doesn't talk about it because that's not the purpose of the Mishnah. the Mishnah here is not discussing what in general, all of these things are what you divide and what he divides. That's not what our Mishnah is getting at. Our Mishnah is really talking about the holiday sacrifices. So it's not applicable at all. Oh, it mentions the Lechem Apanim. Yeah, it mentions Lechem Apanim only because it's mentioning that the Lechem Apanim is connected to the holiday sacrifices. There's a connection there. There's a contrast that we need to make about the Lechem Apanim on a Yom Tov versus the Lechem Apanim on a regular Shabbos. That we understand why it mentions, but it's not just mentioning all cases. So that's why the Mishnah doesn't say it. Comes along Rabbi Yehuda, he says, by the way, I just want you to know that Musafin, you do divide also between the Mishmar that arrives and the Mishmar that leaves. Now, there is a question here as to why does the Mishmar that arrives, why do they get a portion of this? They weren't involved in doing the service of this. They weren't involved in bringing the Musaf sacrifice. The Mishmar that's leaving brought the sacrifice. So why did they get to divide the hides? What's their involvement? So on this, the answer is, this Rashi mentions, and the answer is because they are also flipping it. They're moving it around, helping burning the limbs that are on the altar. So therefore, this is a burnt offering, and they're involved with the burning of it. So they weren't the ones who put it onto the altar, but they're the ones who are involved in the burning of it afterwards, and therefore they would be able to get a portion. According to Rabbi Yehuda, they also get something. Again, they're not that involved in it because it was mainly burnt probably before, but they do a little of the involved. They're slightly involved, and therefore, according to Rabbi Yehuda, they deserve to get a portion. Now, the Gemara does ask some questions on this, and the Gemara is going to prove Rabbi Yehuda wrong, but it doesn't ask from our Mishnah. Where does the Gemara ask from? It may say a brisa. The Bnei Yeshiva asked a contradiction that says Mishmar Yotzes Oisa Tamid Shal Shachar. The Mishmar that's leaving, they do the morning sacrifice, Umusafin, and they do the Musaf sacrifice. Mishmar Nechnases Oisa Tamid Shal Ben Arbaim. The Mishmar that's arriving, again, on Shabbos is when they switch. So that means there's a Mishmar leaving and a Mishmar arriving, and this is Shabbos. So the one that's arriving, what do? They do the Oisa Tamid Shal Ben Arbaim. Uvazicha, they do the afternoon sacrifice. They also do the showbreads had the frankincense, spoon of frankincense that was there, and they would bring that and put it on the altar, just like they would do the afternoon sacrifice. They would also do the bazichin. Now, it doesn't mention vilu musaf and cholkin like atani. Now, the brisa doesn't mention about the fact that the musaf is divided, that they divide the musaf into both groups. They both are involved in getting a portion of the musaf. So the Gemara answers that that's not a problem, because this brisa is not talking about who partakes of it. It's talking about who does the work. We're not talking about the portions that are divided, the distribution of the portions here. This brisa seems to be talking about the work that was done, and therefore it's talking about the work that was done. The work that was done was basically the morning. The mishmar that's leaving are the ones that are doing the morning sacrifice and the musaf. They want to tell me who's got a portion? That's not the discussion in this brisa. So the Gemara says Amar Rav about Tanat Shmuel, but Shmuel has an extra sentence to this brisa. There's a brisa that was learned in the Beis Medrash of Shmuel, and he understands that there's an extra line in that talks about the Mayri B'Chaluka, that it talks about the division, the distribution of Musaf and Cholkin, the Mayri B'Chaluka, Uva Musaf and Cholkin like Otani. And it doesn't mention about the musaf that you divided. It doesn't mention that on the musaf you divided. The Tanit Veishmol Mishmar Yotzes Hayotz Tamid Shal Shachar. The mishmar that leaves does the morning sacrifice. Umusafin, and they do the musaf sacrifice. Mishmara hanichnas Tamid Shal Ben Arbaim Uvazichin. And the mishmar that's arriving, what do? They do the afternoon, and they do the bazichin, which is the spoon of frankincense. And there were 4 kayanim that would enter. Shnayim mishmar zu, shnayim mishmar zu. 2 from this mishmar, 2 from that mishmar, and they would be the ones who apportion the lechem apanim. Cholkim lechem apanim. They would divide the lechem apanim. So here the Bryce is adding the sentence that talks about the portions. And it's mentioning how the 4 kainim would apportion it. 2 of them would deal with the kainim that were arrived, the mishmar that's leaving. 2 would be the kainim, the mishmar that's arriving, and they would apportion the lechem apanim. Like Otani, and it doesn't mention that the musaf they would also apportion. Why doesn't it mention that? This brisa does mention about the portions. It doesn't mention that they divided that between the mishmaris, the hides of the musaf. It doesn't mention that. To Yuvta, Rav Yehuda, to Yuvta. That proves Rav Yehuda wrong, because if that was something that was divided between the two mishmars, it should have mentioned it, just like it mentions the lechem hapanim. Again, our mission doesn't have to mention it, because our mission is not trying to tell us about the dividing. It's not trying to tell us about all the things that were divided in the Beis Hamikdash. Our mission is specifically talking about lechem hapanim. It's not talking about anything else like hides. But the brisa here, the goal of the brisa was to talk about these things, like what gets divided between the two, who gets this, who gets that. So the brisa's goal is to teach us this law. It should have mentioned the musaf, and if it doesn't, it means that it's left out because it's not true. So that proves Rav Yehuda wrong. So the ones that enter would divide in suffering. They would divide in the north. Now the Gemara says, Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught in a brisa, that the brisa says that why was this? Why did the ones that were entering, meaning the ones that are new for this week, they're the coming week, they get their portion of the lechem hapanim, they get their portion of the showbread in the north, which is the honorable area. And why do the ones who leaving get their portion in the south, which was a less honorable area? Why was that? So the brisa says, you know why? We want everyone to see. Kadesh Yiru. They should all see that the ones that are arriving, the ones that are leaving, they should see that, you know, who's who. Now, why do you need to see who's who? So the idea seems to have to do with the fact that we didn't want there to be any fights. You know, the ones that are arriving have their avodah. The ones that are leaving their avodah, they're ready to leave. There shouldn't be any fights. Like there was a thought that maybe if we allowed them to be in the north, the ones that are leaving in the north, they might end up doing the avodah by mistake, or there might be some fighting going on. Not better do this one group. This group goes here. That group goes there, and this way, Shalom al Yisrael, they all have peace. There's no one's going to make any mistakes. It's very clear to everyone who's who and which group you're with, and you're not supposed to be doing, the group that's leaving is not supposed to be heading back and doing any work in the Beis Hamikdash. That's stepping on the other people's toes. So that was that's the explanation of why did we divide it up. This is exact moment of when they're sort of like they're starting to leave. This group is leaving. This group is arriving. So we want to make it a very smooth. Giving over the reins to the next group, so to speak. Now, the Gemara now mentions the story of Bilga. This is a big story over here. Bilga li'olam chalekas v'darim. The Mishnah had said that that the Mishmar of Bilga, which was the 15th Mishmar from the 24 Mishmaros, they would always divide in the less honorable area. So when was that really applicable? That was applicable when they arrived. When they arrived, they did very different than the other mishmaros. The other mishmaros, when they arrived, they got their portion in the north. Bilga comes along. Oh, you guys got to go to the south. We're going to give the 14th mishmar, the one that's leaving, Yeshevav, they're going to get to go in the north a second time. They got the north when they arrived. Now the Yeshevav mishmar, the 14th mishmar, is leaving. They're going to get again to get the portion in the north. And the Bilga mishmar arrived, they're getting their portion in the less honorable area in the south. And the Gemara says, Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught in a brisa, Ma'isa b'Miriam bas Bilga shemira dasa. The story of this Miriam was an individual who was one of the daughters of this involved, part of this family called the Bilga family. And it says her name was Miriam bas Bilga, but she was not the daughter of the head of the Bilga Mishmar, as we said, because the Mishmar started in the time of the first Beis Hamikdash, and this story is in the time of Chanukah. So it's the story of Miriam bas Bilga. She went and she married a from the one of these officers of the kings of the Greek kings. And when the Yevanim entered when the Greeks entered so she was Hamer Dasa, which means she was she switched her religion. She converted out, and she went and she married a Greek officer. And when the Greeks entered the Heichal, the structure of the Beis Hamikdash, she was with them. That's how low she was, that she converted out, and she even went to desecrate, so to speak, or she was part of their desecration. She was part of their destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. And she was meva'etes besanla, and she even took her shoe, and she was kicking with her shoe al gabi hamizbeach, on the mizbeach. V'amra, and she screamed at the mizbeach, and she said, "Lukus, Lukus, wolf, wolf, ad masai atem mechalim umayna shel Yisrael." Until when are you eating up the money of the Yidden that they bring sacrifices, and you're just consuming the sacrifices? And you're not helping them when they're in the time of need. You alter, you're just eating and taking, and you're not giving and not helping them. That was her scream at the base, at the altar. Very interesting scream that she had. She's screaming at the altar. She left the religion. She's married to a Greek general and a Greek officer, and she's screaming at the. She calls it she says wolf, wolf. And the reason she calls it a wolf is because wolves eat sheep. That they and so the Beis Hamikdash every day was a sacrifice, the sheep, the lamb. So wolves eat lamb. That's what they destroy. So in other words, she's calling it a mizbeach. Your mizbeach, basically referring to Hashem, but she's saying you consume the sacrifices, the daily sacrifices of the Jewish people. Oh, until when are you going to keep on consuming them, and you're not even going to help them? And she screams at them. She does this act of kicking it with her sandal. Now, and when the rabbis heard this, they locked up her ring. That means the ring that they normally use to sacrifice the animals. It seems like they would sacrifice the animal upside down, and they would put a ring around its neck to hold it in place. And so the ring was in the ground, and it would open up, or it would slide up, and then you could stick the head in, and then you would do the ring would lock the neck of the animal tightly, so that it would hold the animal in place and to make it easier, at least. And what did they do for Bilga? They said, sorry, you can't use yours. She had the Bilga, I'm sorry, that family, Bilga, the family, the Mishmar of Bilga had a ring, but it was actually locked. They didn't remove the ring, but they locked it that it couldn't be used. She had to borrow that Mishmar. I keep saying she, because we're thinking about Miriam, but it's really the Mishmar, the group of men, all the Kohanim of this Mishmar. They had to end up borrowing someone else, using someone else's ring, or according to some opinions, they actually had to do it by hand. They had to hold the animal down by hand without using a ring. So they also locked up that Mishmar's cubby, and they weren't able to put either their clothing or their knives, and that was the punishment for them. So the three punishments had to divide in the south. Even when they arrived, they should have been getting in the north. The showbreads, they only got that in the south, and then their ring wasn't able to be used for the slaughtering of the animals during their mishmar. They weren't able to use that ring, and they weren't able to use their cubby. And some say that there was another reason, not to do with Miriam Bas Bilga, but really it had to do with the fact that their mishmar was lazy. And Yeshevav, their brothers were V'shemesh Tachtav. They entered with them. In other words, there's a question of if this is the right girsa exactly. Some say that you don't use the word Nichnas Yeshevav Achiv. Yeshevav, their brother, meaning the other group of Kohanim, the 14th group. They're the 15th group. The Bilga's the 15th group. Their brothers, the Yeshevav would enter in their place, meaning they would stay on from the previous week, V'shemesh Tachtav, and they would do the service in their place, because the Mishmar of Bilga was lazy. Even though they normally a shachin, a neighbor of the wicked, don't benefit. It says, Oila Rasha, Oila Shchena, woe to the Rasha, woe to the wicked. That means normally if you're a neighbor to the wicked, you don't really benefit. And here, what happened? Bilga, that Mishmar, that group, they didn't get to divide the showbread in the north, even when they arrived. Instead, they went to the south. So what did the group that was leaving get from that? They got to do it in the north. What do you mean? They're a neighbor of the wicked. The neighbor of the wicked is supposed to lose out because they're neighbors with the wicked. Nope. This was an exception to the rule. They actually merited to get the north both times. Yesheva was a neighbor to the wicked Bilga because Bilga would come late. They would be lazy, or because of the story of Miriam Bas Bilga. And the Gemara says that they actually would benefit because they were neighbors. So they ended up getting the north both times. Shreinei Bilga nistakru. The neighbors of Bilga did get a reward. Because Bilga always divides the showbread in the south. The Yeshev of Elchiv and Yeshev of his brother, but Safai, they always get it in the north. So they actually benefited. So now the Gemara asks, it's good according to the opinion that the Mishmar of Bilga, that it's Shoyhe Lavai, that it comes late. So we understand why we give a knas and give a penalty to the whole Mishmar. We have to give a penalty to the whole Mishmar. They come late. Maybe not every single one of them, but the majority maybe. So therefore, we're going to give a We're going to give a penalty. You know what? You guys come late. You're going to lose these three things. You're going to have to divide in the south. You're going to have to lose. You don't have the option to use your ring, and you don't have the option to use your cup. Okay, that makes sense. The story, if it's because of Miriam Bas Bilga, of that girl who converted out, Mishum Brate Kansina Leila Day, because of this girl, this daughter, we're gonna knas him, we're gonna give him a penalty because of his daughter. That makes sense. In fact, there's a pasuk that says, Lo Yimsu Avos Al Banim. The parent doesn't die because of the child. The parent doesn't get punished because of a child. So how could you punish the parent that they get embarrassed in the Beis Hamikdash and they don't get access? Amar Abaye in. Yes, we do punish the parent because of the child. Not when it's the child's sin, when the sin stems from the parent. Like people say, Shusa de Yanuka, the words of a child, Bashuka, in the marketplace, it's either from the father or the mother. So in other words, why are we punishing the parents here? Because you know why? Because they started this. They're the ones who say this. The children are just repeating words that they heard in their house numerous times. And every Shabbos meal or every time came up, they would always say that. Oh, so if this child Miriam is speaking of disrespectfully about about Hashem and about the Mizbeach and going and banging on the Mizbeach, probably because her father spoke disrespectfully about the Mizbeach, about the Beis Hamikdash. And so the Gemara says, okay, so punish the parents. Are you going to punish the whole Mishmar just because of that? Abaye says, Abaye says, woe to the Russia, woe to the neighbor. And what that means is that they lose out. You're part of this family. You're part of the Bilga group. You lose out. Rashi brings over here that the source of this is by the stones of a tzaras house. That when there's a stone that's on one house, but it's the same stone is there are two houses connected, so you actually they lose out because you have to remove it and get rid of it, and so they all lose out. And so what does Rashi says? This guy's was cheap. His Einoi Tzara B'Kaleb. He didn't want to lend his possessions, therefore he got tzaras. Why did he get leprosy? Or why does the house get leprosy? He didn't want to give his possessions to lend them to anyone. So because he loses out, guess what? His friend also loses out. Because he sinned, his friend loses out. And from here we see that woe to the wicked, woe to the shachin. And we see that also in our Gemara. We see it from the story of Miriam Bas Bilga, that she, because of what she did, it comes out that you see that sometimes, in other words, why does the whole Mishmar lose? It's interesting because we do find that one of the Mishmars got rewarded. The neighbor of hers benefited the Yeshevov, but in general, you see that the entire Mishmar of hers lost out because of her. Why? Because Oila Rasha, Oila Shchena, woe to the wicked, woe to their neighbor. And then the last 4 words of the Masechta, I don't know if you might want to save for you'll see them during the 9 days. So maybe I'll just leave it at that, and you can decide if you want to say the last 4 words, and then it brings a pasuk. Or you could save it maybe during the 9 days. You might want to do a siyum. So I'll just leave it at that. But let me tell you the Rebbe's vart here. Now we have a few minutes. So the Rebbe has two main points. Beautiful like video of the Rebbe's. So number one, the famous question over here is, why are we punishing Miriam Bas Bilga? Why are we punishing her mishmar? Because of her. What did she do? So the Gemara makes it sound like, okay, she converted out. Okay, she married a Greek general. Okay, fine, Greek soldier. Okay, fine. Okay, she enters she enters the temple. You know what the problem is? She banged on the altar and she screams at it. That's what we're bothered. That's the problem, that she bangs with her shoe on the altar. What about the fact that she converted out of Yiddishkeit? What about the fact that she married a Greek soldier, married a guy? That we're not worried about. They were only worried that she's disrespectful to the altar. Doesn't that? It sounds it's like a small sin compared to the banging. Okay, banged on the altar with her shoe. That's the big thing. So the thing is, the Rebbe says, you see from here that really every yid has a neshama that's connected to the Eibishter, and so connected that we expect that the Eibishter, even when Hashem punishes, it's only because he loves us so much. Therefore, he's saying that you're doing something wrong. Why does Hashem care if we do something wrong? Only because Hashem loves us so much. And here you see that even though she did all this, she converted out and she married this guy. Nevertheless, what's Hashem worried about? That she's banging, she's doing that Hashem has such love for her that he's worried that the love is still there. Yisrael, even though a person sins, he's a Yisrael, and nevertheless, because she's banging on the altar, the Eibishter is worried that the Eibishter is concerning to Hashem. That why is she doing that? That she shouldn't, because of his great love. That means the Eibishter's love is tremendous, is still there, and that's why the punishment is about what she did. In other words, that's showing the great love that Hashem has for her, in the fact that every sin is only like external. This, that she converted out and she married, that's external sin. And really, she's really one with it. She's really connected to it. She's really a pure yid. And she has a yitzroi takva. It's her yetzahara, her evil inclination that got her. But really, she's one with us. Ava bishachata, she's a Yisrael. That's number one. And then comes then the Rebbe says, and that's why you can learn a lesson about good is about a neighbor. Woe is to wicked, and woe is to the neighbor, and which ultimately leads to the next sentence, that if it's good is to the tzaddik, and so on to their neighbor. And so the idea is that you learn that even from her, because really every yid is very precious. But then the Rebbe says, and what's the positive side of this story of Miriam Bas Bilga? Look at what she screams, and David caught on to it last on Friday. That look at what she's screaming, that she's so upset. She's a woman who went and converted out, and she marries a guy, and not only a guy, a Greek soldier, so an enemy, the mamish, the enemies of the Yidden, and she's even entering the Beis Hamikdash with them to destroy it. She's entering them as they're desecrating it. And what does she do? These are the Greeks in the time of Hanukkah. She's entering with them. And what does she do? She's upset. She's hitting she's screaming at the Mizbeach. Why? She's worried about another Yid. Why is another Yid suffering? Why aren't you helping the Yidden? It hurts her that her brothers are suffering. There you see the beauty of even this woman who's sinning and the terrible sin, to the worst of the worst, and yet she's so worried and she's so pained over the fact that Hashem is not helping the Yidden. Look at the beauty of this Miriam Bas Bilga. And Memela, you can see from there about this. We learn from her a halacha. We learn from her about what was to the wicked, what was to their neighbor, good is to the righteous, and the same thing their neighbor. And so you learn such a lesson from her. And the message for us is that when you have someone who's similar in such a way, you should never think that they are a wicked person. How dare we go get close to them? And we shouldn't be a neighbor to, no, you should be influencing them. You should see that they're really just like her, that it's only external things that are causing them to sin. Really, internally, they're Yisrael who, and you should influence them. In this way, they will be considered that they're coming, instead of you being considered going next to a wicked person. If you influence them in a positive way, then it's considered that they're getting close to a tzaddik rather than you getting close to a rasha. We look at it as, in other words, so why would you want it to be considered that, that they're the wicked person and you're getting close to them? Instead, if you influence them, then it's considered that they are getting close, that it's considered that they're getting close to the righteous, rather than considered like you getting close to the wicked. A beautiful insight. Anyway, so there's a continuation to this sikha that the Rebbe said. Beautiful insight that the Rebbe said over here. And then some person was at the Farbrengen, so he wrote a letter to the Rebbe that, why would you want to speak positive about Miriam Bas Bilga? Are you talking? The Gemara is speaking how negative. Why would you have nothing better to talk about? The Rebbe could talk for hours and hours. You have nothing better to talk about, he wrote to the Rebbe, than to speak a positive thing about this Miriam Bas Bilga, this woman, this. So the Rebbe said, the Rebbe mentioned it later on. He says that someone wrote this letter. And the thing is that the Alter Rebbe had a story. Someone came to the Alter Rebbe with a dibuk. A dibuk means that you have another soul sort of like attached to you, and you have you're like two personalities, and you can't you can't. It's like a terrible pain and suffering.
You are possessed.
Possessed would be I don't know how common such a thing is, but anyway. So someone came to the Alter Rebbe with this problem that they were possessed, and by this other soul, and the Alter Rebbe gave a whole insight about the fact that Zechariah was murdered. Zechariah, the famous prophet, Zechariah was murdered, and Zechariah was murdered by another Yid. The Yid went and killed Zechariah, and the amount of suffering that happened because of Zechariah's death, the blood, it says his blood didn't stop bubbling, and in fact, even when they came to destroy the Beis Hamikdash, the enemy said, "Why aren't you? I'm destroying so many of you, hundreds of thousands of Yidden, and you're still not gonna. There's no you're not gonna be appeased. There's no appeasement for you. What'd you say?
He wanted it to stop bubbling. He goes, I'm killing
appeased.
Millions, and you're still bubbling.
You're still bubbling. You're not being appeased by this. Do you want me to kill more? Should I kill more? How long is it going to take till we sort of like take revenge on your killers? How much more do I need to do? And that's when the blood stopped bubbling. So the Alter Rebbe explained that the person who killed Zechariah, what was his logic? The reason why he did it, he really meant well, even though he killed him, and he knew he would probably get killed for it. But he killed Zechariah. The reason is because a prophecy that's verbalized is for sure going to have, it's much harder to remove, to retract. If a prophecy isn't verbalized, therefore, if it's not verbalized, you don't have to, it's not so hard for Hashem to retract it. And so this person said, I'm going to give up my life to murder Zechariah. In this way, the whole Klal Yisrael will be saved from death, from destruction. The Beis Hamikdash is not going to be destroyed. Why? I'm going to give up my life because I'm going to kill him. He's trying to verbalize this prophecy that Beis Hamikdash is going to be destroyed and all Klal Yisrael is going to go into exile. We're going to have many people die. I'm going to be Meiser Nefesh. Now, of course, the logic was a little corrupted logic and a little warped, but nevertheless, that was his logic. And all of a sudden, the Alter Rebbe said these words, and all of a sudden, the dibuk left. Why did the dibuk leave? Because this soul of this individual who killed Zechariah was the dibuk that attached. It could never be relaxed. It couldn't go to Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden. It couldn't go to Gehenna because it did such a terrible, horrific crime. And so it was in this world for thousands of years, since the time of the destruction, and since Zechariah was murdered. And so Hashem, there are 1,000 years. So Hashem, 2,000 years, I should say. But so what did Hashem? So what happened now? The dibuk left because now the Alter Rebbe gave an understanding, a limud zchus, something positive about why he murdered Zechariah, and all of a sudden the dibuk was able to enter Gehenna probably, and ultimately be able to get cleansed for their sin, because the Alter Rebbe gave a limud zchus, and the Rebbe ended with that. And what we understand from this is that when the Rebbe said this story about Miriam Bas Bilga, what the Rebbe was obviously doing was allowing her soul to finally have its rectification. And maybe it was a dibuk someone, or maybe it was just stuck there in the world. And this limud zuchus, this positive twist of spin on the story, allowed her to finally be able to get her atonement, so to speak. And that's why obviously the Rebbe had said this vart to be able to give her, allow her to her soul to finally have rest after the story of Hanukkah. Since the story of Hanukkah, it's been hovering. Her soul was stuck in the world without being able to have any rest. So with that, we conclude Tractate Sukkah and chapter Hachalil. And Zai Gesund, everyone. Mazel Tov. We will Metz Hashem start tomorrow. Sefta Soita.
Wow. Thank you, Rabbi. Mazel Tov.
Okay.
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Hadron Allah. Mazel
Bye.
Tov.